House will come to order. The Pledge of Allegiance this morning will be led by Brad Dick from University of Toledo Law School.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Kohler, please take the roll.
Representatives Becker, Buck,
Yeah, sure.
Buckner, Conti, Corum, Court, Del Grosso, Dorr excused, Duran, Representative Duran,
Duran? She was here. Absent.
absent, Everett, Exum, Fields, Fisher, Foote, Garcia, Representative Garcia, absent, Gardner, Giroux, Janal, Hamner. Thanks. Representative Duran's present. Holbert, Hollinghorse, Madam Majority Leader.
Excused.
Humphrey.
Amy's running late.
Okay. Joshi. Kagan. Kraft-Tharp. Labuda. Landgraf, excused. Lawrence. Lebsock. Representative Lebsock. Absent. Lee. May. McCann. McLaughlin. Representative Lebsock is present. McNulty excused. Melton. Representative Melton. Representative Garcia is present. Representative McNulty is present. Melton? Absent. Mitch Bush. Moreno. Murray is excused. Navarro. Nordberg. Pabon. Peniston. Pedersen. Primavera. Priola. Rankin. Rosenthal. Ryden. Sane. Salazar. Schaefer. Scott. Singer. Sonnenberg. Stevens is excused. Swam. Zabo. Tyler. Representative Melton's present. Representative Tyler. Vigil. Waller. Williams. Wilson. Wright. Young. Speaker Ferrandino. They're both here.
With 61 members present, 4 excused, a quorum is present. Representative Becker. That'll be $2. Same time, same place, every day.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the reading of the Journal of April 15th be dispensed with and that it be approved as corrected by the Chief Clerk.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes actually really have it. The motion is adopted. Announcements and introductions. Representative Primavera.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For members of the Public Health Care and Human Services Committee, we will be hearing House Bill 1362 by Representative Moreno last on the calendar today. I just wanted to let you know that.
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, today I'd like for you to welcome the East High School 5A State Championship team to the Colorado General Assembly. Let them know how proud we are of them.
Representative McCann.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I also want to join Representative Williams in welcoming the state basketball champions from East High School. East is in my district, and both of my children graduated from East, so I know what a great school it is. Go Angels!
Further announcements and introductions. Seeing none, we'll proceed to our next order of business. Third reading of bills, final passage. Members, please return to your desks. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of the House Bill 1309.
House Bill 1309 by Representative Gardner, also Senator Stedman, concerning repurposing the Day Surgery Center at the Denver Reception and Diagnostic Center into an auxiliary medical facility.
Mr. Assistant Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move for the passage of House Bill 1309 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the passage of House Bill 1309 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative Priola. Close the machine. With 61 aye votes, 0 no votes, 4 excused, and 0 absent, House Bill 1309 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of House Bill 1012.
House Bill 1012 by Representatives Tyler and Jarrell, Senator Cavales, concerning income tax credits to promote investment in Colorado advanced industries in connection with making and reducing appropriations.
Mr. Assistant Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move for the passage of House Bill 1012 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the passage of House Bill 1012 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Close the machine. Close the machine. With 41 aye votes, 20 no votes, 4 excused, and 0 absent, House Bill 1012 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of House Bill 1023.
House Bill 1023, Representative Lee, also Senator Ulibarri, concerning the provision of social workers and juveniles in connection with making and reducing appropriations.
Mr. Assistant Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move for the passage of House Bill 1023 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the passage of House Bill 1023 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representatives McNulty and Szabo. Close the machine. With 37 aye votes, 24 no votes, 4 excused, and 0 absent, House Bill 1023 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of House Bill 1085. 1032.
House Bill 1032, Representative Kagan, also Senator Guzman, concerning the provision of Defense Counsel juvenile offenders in connection with making and reducing appropriations.
Mr. Assistant Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move for the passage of House Bill 1032 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the passage of House Bill 1032 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Close the machine. With 40 aye votes, 22 no votes, 3 excused, and 0 absent, House Bill 1032 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of House Bill 1085.
House Bill 1085, Representative Fields, also Senator Zenzinger, concerning adult education in connection with creating an adult educational literacy grant program to provide state monies for adult education programs that participate in workforce development partnerships and making and reducing appropriations.
Mr. Assistant Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move for the passage of House Bill 1085 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House, the passage of House Bill 1085 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine. Members proceed to vote. Representatives Kagan, Melton, Mitch Bush, Sonnenberg, and Salazar. Close the machine. With 37 aye votes, 26 no votes, 2 excused, and 0 absent, House Bill 1085 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of House Bill 1093.
House Bill 1093, Representative Duran, also Senator Newell, concerning the establishment of the Creative District Community Loan Fund in connection with making and reducing appropriations.
Mr. Assistant Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move for the passage of House Bill 1093 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question before the House, the passage of House Bill 1093 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine. The members proceed to vote. Representative Conte and Priola. Close the machine. With 39 aye votes, 24 no votes, 2 excused, and 0 absent, House Bill 1093 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of House Bill 1096.
House Bill 1096, Representative V. Hall, Senator Schwartz, concerning underfunded courthouse facilities grant program in connection with making and reducing appropriations.
Mr. Assistant Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move for the passage of House Bill 1096 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House, the passage of House Bill 1096 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representatives Buck and Lebsock. Close the machine. With 38 aye votes, 25 no votes, 2 excused, and 0 absent, House Bill 1096 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of House Bill 1101.
House Bill 1101, Representative Tyler, also Senator Schwartz, concerning a partial business personal property tax exemption for community solar gardens.
Mr. Assistant Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move for the passage of House Bill 1101 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House, the passage of House Bill 1101 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative Kagan. Close the machine. With 38 aye votes, 25 no votes, 2 excused, and 0 absent, House Bill 1101 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of House Bill 1124.
House Bill 1124, Representative Salazar, also Senator Talktrop, concerning in-state tuition classification for American Indians from tribes with historical ties to Colorado in connection with making and reducing appropriations.
Mr. Assistant Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move for the passage of House Bill 1124 on third reading and final passage.
Representative Giroux.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, we talked about this bill yesterday, and the fact that we're supporting the Native American population, I'm in favor of. In fact, I'm descended from the Montauk Indian tribe in northeastern United States. But I wanted to talk about what Fort Lewis is able to do in the programs that they serve the Native American students. They have the Native American Center. They have the Native American Indigenous Studies Department, And this is offering interdisciplinary, comparative, and ultimately transformative approach to the study of historical, political, social, and ongoing experience of Native Americans. They have Hosoni Days, the Native American Center, and a Wanbli Audit Club organized an annual 7-day spring celebration of renewal. The Wanbli Audit Indian Club, which is a Native American student club, which annually sponsors activities that include a welcome back picnic, a Halloween powwow, benefit powwows, Thanksgiving and Christmas banquets, and guest speakers. The Native American Science and Engineering Society, which I think speaks for itself and is doing incredible work and encouraging populations to become more involved in the STEM studies. Native American Honor Society, Native American Alumni Association, the Balasenyam, meaning Red People in the Hopi Language Choir, Intertribal News. The Department of Native American Indigenous Studies offers a course where students produce a bi-weekly newsletter about issues and events affecting Native Americans. The Program for Academic Advancement, which offers extensive individualized assistance and support to its participants who in turn are expected to attend class as scheduled, meet regularly with their tutors, and attend program workshops and events. This is the support that this culture deserves. They have the STEM Cubed. It's a Student Success Services Center. They have the American Indian Business Leaders, which was organized in 1998. And the chapter is a student-based program that provides peer support, leadership, mentoring, career guidance, business networking. They also have the Center of Southwest Studies, the Native Campus Ministries, the Pehuta Tipi Society, the All Peoples Lodge, the Buffalo Council, the Native American Student Success Program.
Representative Giroux, can you bring it back to the bill?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The point of me bringing this up is to tell you that Fort Lewis does an incredible job taking care of our populations of Native American students, and I'm very grateful. And you know, if you want to go to Fort Lewis, anybody in the United States that is of Native American descent can go tuition-free. The reason I can't support 1124 is because the amount of work and the quality of work that Fort Lewis is doing is far superior than what I believe any individual university would be able to afford to provide. The other problem I have with this bill is the fiscal note, because what it's going to do is we have basically an endangered higher education system. This fiscal note is going to cost over $5 million a year for those universities to provide that in-state tuition, and we're talking about students that are not currently residents of Colorado. So what we're going to do is we're going to provide that, we're going to require our public universities and colleges to provide that in-state tuition, but what we're not going to do is we're not going to supplement those universities at all. So we're asking those universities just to do it themselves. And then, on top of that, we have private institutions in the state of Colorado that receive state dollars for tuition assistance, and we're not going to make those private universities and colleges, we're not going to require them to fulfill the same requirements we are public institutions. Why is that? Why are we going to make our public institutions do something that we're not going to make our private institutions perform at, when those private institutions receive general fund dollars for student assistance? Do we really want to help this population? Do we really want to help this culture succeed? I believe we do, and I believe we are within the state of Colorado. We are more fully than all but any other state in the country. I think Minnesota has the other program similar to Fort Lewis. My point to all of this, members, is if you really want to help this population, make all of the institutions, public, private, whomever, make them all adhere to this legislation. Or, better yet, fulfill that very sacred treaty that the state of Colorado has upheld with Fort Lewis College, and instead of offering those students in-state tuition, give them free tuition, which we are, and which we should continue to do. I ask for a no vote on this bill. I'm sure that the sponsor's intentions are good. I just don't think he knows the law, and I know he doesn't understand the budget. Ask for a no vote.
Representative Giroux, I would appreciate you not disparaging members in the well. Representative Giroux.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I apologize if the Representative Salazar took it that way. I did not mean to disparage you. It's just, honestly, what our law does is not what is reflected in this legislation. I ask for a no vote.
Representative Salazar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Giroux, I know the law very well, actually. My firm practices federal Indian law. We represent tribes, we represent tribal institutions. We represent tribal nonprofit organizations. We represent tribal peoples on multiple issues, including education issues, higher education issues. We represent Dene College, represent them on oil and gas issues. I could probably school you in the finer arts of federal Indian law.
Representative Salazar, to the bill, please.
This is a goodness, this bill. I didn't plan on coming to the well at all, because this is a goodness. And you know it in your heart that it is a goodness. And many of you, including my friends on the other side of the aisle, many of you have signed on to this bill. It is such a highly bipartisan bill because it is a goodness. It is a goodness because what we're talking about here is we're talking about American Indian students whose tribes have been forcibly removed from the place where they called home. That's why they have historic ties to Colorado. In many ways, they were removed in such a violent fashion. None of them left in a volunteering mode. And we owe it. We owe it to these tribes, to the children of these tribes, to help them out, to recognize that their presence predates our union, that it predates Columbus, and that it dates back to the times of creation. We owe it to these kids because in the forcible removal and in the forcible placement onto reservations, with the laws that were out there that were designed to keep American Indian people down, keep them from employment, gainful employment, to keep them from being able to realize their own natural resources in a place that they once called home and that they now call home. We owe it to them. Yes, Fort Lewis College is a fantastic college. There's no doubt about that. But not all Native students want to go to Fort Lewis College because they want to study under Nobel Peace Prize winners that you might find at CU Boulder. Or they might want to study aviation at Metro State University. Or they might want to study some other aspects that you will not find at Fort Lewis College. That's why this bill is important. And as many of you know, we can't force private institutions to give in-state tuition, as that would be unconstitutional. If I could figure out a way to do that, I'd probably figure it out. But we cannot. This bill is a goodness. Last night I was rummaging through some pictures and I found a picture of my great-grandmother. She was taken away from her tribe. She was placed in a Spanish-speaking Methodist family and under the auspices of educating her. And she wasn't educated at all. In fact, she was more or less a slave to the family. Then later on, she was kidnapped again by my great-grandfather, and she was not treated very well. And I think about the opportunities that were lost, the opportunities of her people, of being able to understand her culture, of losing her language and only being replaced by another one. And I think about how that's reverberated through the generations. because I'm the only one in my family who's taken any time at all to learn the Apache language. And I think about all the hardship that she has gone through in her life and how it's just indicative of what Native peoples have gone through for generations. This bill is a goodness, and it is owed to them. There is no other people in the United States of America who have suffered the kinds of injustice that they have. This bill is a goodness, and I ask for your support on House Bill 1124.
Seeing no further discussion, question before the House is the passage of House Bill 1124 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine. The members proceed to vote. Representatives Zabo. Close the machine. With 39 aye votes, 25 no votes, 1 excused, and 0 absent, House Bill 1124 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of House Bill 1156.
House Bill 1156 by Representative Moreno, also Senator Ulibarri, concerning extending the age of eligibility for the Child Nutrition and School Lunch Protection Program in connection with making and reducing appropriations.
Mr. Assistant Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move for the passage of House Bill 1156 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House, the passage of House Bill 1156 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative Hollinghorse, close the machine. With 38 aye votes, 26 no votes, 1 excused, and 0 absent, House Bill 1156 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of the House Bill 1276.
House Bill 1276 by Representative Primavera, also Senator Hodge, concerning instruction in cardiopulmonary resuscitation in public schools in connection with making and reducing appropriations.
Mr. Assistant Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move for the passage of House Bill 1276 on third reading and final passage.
Representative Swan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I want to speak again briefly about this bill. I think we can all recognize that despite this bill's good intentions, this bill is a mandate on school districts. It takes money out of the general fund, which could otherwise go to school districts without any strings attached and reduce the negative factor. But this bill is not merely a mandate. This is a mandate on steroids. Think about it for just a moment. It's a mandate ensnared in a mare's nest of bureaucratic regulations, because it's not just simply telling school districts what you have to do, but it's telling school districts that to get this money, you've got to go through a grant application process. So to do that, the school districts have to spend money to figure out what the grant application process looks like. And then on the state side, when the state considers those applications, look what it does. It creates a bureaucracy to consider these applications. Look at this fiscal note. It says that it's going to take, well, it's not much, a quarter of an FTE, but nonetheless, folks, this is money that otherwise could go directly to school districts, and I don't know about your school districts, but my school districts have told me no more mandates. And here we are building up the State Department of Education to administer this grant program when we could otherwise have sent the money directly to the district and reduced the negative factor. Another thing I want to point out in the fiscal note, look on page 3. This bill has technical or mechanical defects. It says that pursuant to statute, the Department of Education is supposed to be expending no more than 2% of program costs like this to administer it. But this bill sets aside more than 2% to administer this program. So the fiscal note itself says that there's a defect in this program right from the beginning. And do you think it'll ever really go away? That, again, as I said the other day, if there's anything worse than having no money for the state, it's having money. Because what we're tempted to do over and over again is create new programs. And that's exactly what this does. And trust me, folks, it's not going to go away. Somehow, but if it does, next time we turn down, I hope that this is going to be one of the first programs that's targeted for extinction. Can't say that that's going to happen for sure, but this richly deserves it. If and when, we all hope we don't have another turn down in the economy, but we all know it's just a matter of time. But again, this bill is a mandate on steroids. It's not needed. There are all kinds of other programs for kids to learn how to do this: Red Cross, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, boys clubs, girls clubs, all kinds of other programs. We don't need to set up a new bureaucracy to do this program. And I'm sure in committee, I actually talked to one of my colleagues about it who listened to the committee, and somebody came in and gave a compelling story on this. Well, trust me, friends, if we all sat down and read the newspapers for 1 week, we could all come up with probably 24 good ideas for new state programs if we just read the newspapers for a week. And come up and argue with me on that point. There's always some kind of sob story in the newspaper that we could come up, use as justification for a new program. But this is a mandate on school districts. That's all this thing is, and it's a mandate wrapped up in a spider web of bureaucratic rules and regulations. So I would urge a no vote on this bill, and I kind of reminded of something that Ken Summers said one time: my friends, come, let us reason together on this bill. And so, with that, I appreciate your time. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I will be brief. CPR training for high school students, for every American, is important. But I will be a no vote on this bill because the compelling story and stories that are told about people having CPR training are just that. They're compelling. And there are private organizations, Representative Swalm mentioned all of them. I received CPR training through Red Cross when I was a teenager. Received it later through the workplace because I had an employer committed to this. I received it in the military. We actually, by governmentalizing this program, may be changing the context in which this is given. And in a way, not helping but hurting, because then nonprofits will say it is something the government is already doing. We ought to move on and use our precious dollars for something else. And dollars are limited, but my belief is that by having the government become involved by government grants, we probably will, in the long run, be hurting the whole program and the whole idea of volunteers, citizens having this training, and the organizations that give this training from doing so. Thank you.
Representative Primavera.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I respect Representative Swalm a lot. We've worked together over the years. But on page 4 of the bill, line 13, this indicates that this is not a mandate. It says on or after September 1st, 2014, each local education provider may apply for a grant. Nobody has to apply for a grant. This is something that's elective if a school entity would like to do that. It's an important bill, and if you'll look at some of the other statistics in the bill, approximately 295,000 emergency medical services treated out of hospital cardiac arrests occur annually nationwide, and roughly 92% of out-of-hospital sudden cardiac arrest victims do not survive. Prompt delivery of cardiopulmonary resuscitation, or CPR, more than doubles a victim's chance of survival, and only 32% of out-of-hospital cardiac arrest victims receive bystander CPR. And for every minute without bystander CPR, survival from witnessed cardiac arrest decreases 7 to 10%. So training high school students on the effective implementation of CPR and the use of defibrillators is an effective way to increase the number of Colorado citizens capable of performing CPR and using an AED to save lives. This bill saves lives. It's really important, and for less than $5 per student, we can train a whole generation of lifesavers. So I ask for an aye vote.
Seeing no further discussion, the question for the House, the passage of House Bill 1276 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine, and members, please vote. Representatives Del Grosso, McNulty, and Pabon. Close the machine. With 40 aye votes, 24 no votes, 1 excused, and 0 absent, House Bill 1276 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of House Bill 1303.
House Bill 1303, Representative Scott and Ferrandino, also Senator Schwartz, concerning the receipt of public testimony from remote locations around the state by legislative committees in connection with making and reducing appropriations.
Mr. Assistant Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move for the passage of House Bill 1303 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House, the passage of House Bill 1303 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine. The members proceed to vote. Representatives Lebsack and McNulty. Close the machine. With 64 aye votes, 0 no votes, 1 excused, and 0 absent, House Bill 1303 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of House Bill 1326.
House Bill 1326, Representatives Primavera and Scott, also Senator Hodge, concerning tax incentives for alternative fuel trucks in connection with making an appropriation.
Mr. Assistant Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move for the passage of House Bill 1326 on third reading and final passage.
Representative Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Under Rule 21C, I request to be excused from voting on House Bill 1326.
Representative Moreno will be granted permission to take a 21C on 1326. Seeing no further discussion, the question for the House, the passage of House Bill 1326 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative Garcia. Close the machine. With 48 aye votes, 15 no votes, 2 excused, and 0 absent, House Bill 1326 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title to House Bill 1348.
House Bill 1348, Representative Ferrandino, also Senator Heath, concerning extension of the effective date of the amended retail sales tax definition adopted in House Bill 13-1295 to take effect only if Congress enacts an act that authorizes states to require certain retailers to pay, collect, or remit state or local sales tax.
Mr. Assistant Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move for the passage of House Bill 1348 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the passage of House Bill 1348 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representatives Buck, Conti, and Fisher. Representative Buck. Close the machine. With 46 aye votes, 18 members who don't want late bills, 1 excused, and 0 absent, House Bill 1348 is passed. Co-sponsors. You and me both. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title to Senate Bill 156.
Senate Bill 156 by Senators Kafalis and Heath, also Representative Lee, concerning a requirement that a public benefit corporation file an annual report.
Mr. Assistant Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move for the passage of Senate Bill 156 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House, the passage of Senate Bill 156 on third reading, final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representatives Conti and Gardner. Close the machine with 40 aye votes, 24 no votes, 1 excused, and 0 absent. Senate Bill 156 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of Senate Bill 165.
Senate Bill 165 by Senator Johnston and Kerr, also Representatives Murray and Penniston, concerning the percentage at which to rate the student academic growth standard for the purpose of licensed personnel performance evaluations in the 2014-15 academic year.
Mr. Assistant Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move for the passage of Senate Bill 165 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the passage of Senate Bill 165 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative Szabo and Buck, close the machine. With 53 aye votes, 11 no votes, 1 excused, and 0 absent, Senate Bill 165 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title to House Bill 1347.
House Bill 1347, Representative Court, also Senator Newell, considering statutory established time periods that are multiples of 7 days.
Mr. Assistant Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move for the passage of House Bill 1347 on third reading and final passage.
Representative Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, members, a couple of years ago, I carried a giant bill that implemented the rule of sevens, which is the trend in court systems, and I was assured we had every instance in our statutes that dealt with the multiples of 7, although on seconds I was being handed amendments and we were drafting them. And then last year I was assured that we had dealt with all the multiples of 7. And Representative Court, we're assured that this is the last instance of the rules of multiples of 7. But I'm wagering that there will be one more, but I urge an aye vote on this.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, the question for the House is the passage of House Bill 1347 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative Fields. Close the machine with 64 aye votes, 0 no votes, 1 excused, and 0 absent. House Bill 1347 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of House Bill 1300.
House Bill 1300, Representatives Garcia and Duran, all Senator Seven, concerning a 2014-15 state fiscal year general fund transfer to the Colorado State Fair Authority cash fund to support the state fair's programs with the state's 4-H clubs and the Colorado Association of National Future Farmers of America organization in connection with reducing an appropriation.
Mr. Assistant Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move for the passage of House Bill 1300 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the passage of House Bill 1300 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Close the machine with 47 aye votes, 17 no votes, 1 excused, and 0 absent. House Bill 1300 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Del Grosso. Caucus? You guys want a caucus? Your caucus chair. In 10 minutes? Okay, so someone's got to call for it. Representative Conti.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Republicans, we are going to meet caucus in room 107 in the basement in about 10 minutes. In 10 minutes.
Okay.
Anything you want them to bring?
The House will stand in a recess until the Republicans are done with their caucus on the amendment to the budget.
Give us an hour.
An hour? Let's just say when you're done, we'll come up. Let's try and make it less than an hour. And just so members know, actually, because it's a good point with the minority leader, and I haven't told him yet, we will be back on the floor tomorrow, but committee should be done quickly, so we won't be hopefully too late tomorrow. And then Thursday, expect to be here late into the evening on Thursday night. That's your penalty for getting off Friday. The House will be in recess. Mr. Kohler, the cloak rule is not relaxed.
But the cuff rule also needs to be.
What? You know you'll be my neighbor. You know you're my neighbor. We're at Second between Cherry. Yeah. Yeah, we're 2 blocks. And we're moving. We're moving, but we're going south. And you know David lives on the corner. David lives on Bannock between First and Ellsworth. I'm going to live on First between Bannock and Cherry. And you live right between Cherry, Delaware, and Alano. Yes. On Second. I'm excited. We do
How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. There's like, oh yeah, there's like millions of paperwork for playing softball. I just need your address and then your signature again there.
Do you know what day of the week we're going to be yet?
I don't. Crystal was asking me. I think they're figuring that stuff out here now. And we're trying to come up with a name, if you have any ideas.
Yeah,
I don't know if you heard about the whole committee of the whole idea up there, the boys.
Right.
They are,
That was shot down.
yeah, I think so.
And David thinks we need one by today? Is that true?
Yes, I have to submit all the paperwork today.
Okay.
So I told everybody to just text me with ideas and then we'll list them all out and see what everybody thinks.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
Oh my goodness.
We had talked on the phone, I forgot that it's not Jeremy. So maybe we don't need it. Can you ask Ken Ron or Aaron Silver? Talk to Aaron. Yeah, no problem. Thank you. Mr. Kohler, please call the members who are absent.
Representatives Buck, Buckner, Court, Del Grosso, Foote, Holbert, Kagan, Lee, McLaughlin, McNulty, Melton, Nordberg, Pabon, Peniston, Pedersen, Salazar, Scott, and Sonnenberg.
Where's the rest of our members? Can we get staff to go get our members? Yeah. I don't know where they are. And it's pissing me off. Yeah, the chimes are on. We start finding members who aren't here.
Mr. Speaker of the House, Mark Farragut. Come on up. Come on. It's all right. He doesn't bite. You're okay.
Hi. What's your name?
Let's get a photograph for them real quick. Ava, here, hold that. All right, we're ready. Good. She thought that was hers.
Did you see the look on her face? Oh, disappointment. She thought that was hers. Okay, really? If looks can kill you. Doug, please don't press it. I thought he was here. I'd press your button if I were you. Otherwise, you're going to owe money. Representatives Holbert, Kagan, Lee, McLaughlin, Del Grosso. Give you a count of 10 and then you're fined. Okay, that's 10. Representatives Del Grosso, Holbert, Lee, and McLaughlin are fined $5 each. Madam Majority Leader, let me raise the call.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to raise the call of the House.
Seeing no objection, the call of the House will be raised. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the House proceed out of order for consideration of conference committee reports.
Seeing no objection, the House will proceed out of order for consideration of conference committee reports. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of House Bill 1193.
House Bill 1193, Representative Salazar, also Senator Cafalas, concerning requirements governing the imposition of a fee for the research and retrieval of public records under the Colorado Open Records Act.
Representative Salazar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move that the House adopt the first report of the First Conference Committee on House Bill 1193.
Please explain why.
The Senate had put an amendment on this bill that we disagreed with. We went to the Senate, said, we disagree with it. They said, okay, and they stripped it. And that's why we should pass it, because it passed out of this House without that amendment, and they're willing to strip it. So I ask for your yes vote.
Seeing no further discussion, the question for the House is to adopt the first report of the First Conference Committee on House Bill 1193. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative Holbert. Close the machine. With 63 aye votes, 0 no votes, 1 excused, and 1 absent, House Bill 1190, the House concurs and Senate, the House concurs, the House adopts the first conference committee report for House Bill 1193. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the repassage of House Bill 1193.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the repassage of House Bill 1193 as amended. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representatives Holbert, Navarro, and Priola. Anybody know where he is? What? Close the machine. With 41 aye votes, 22 no votes, 1 excused, and 1 absent, House Bill 1193 is repassed. Co-sponsors. You're already fined $5, Representative Holbert, just so you know. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title to Senate Bill 131.
Senate Bill 131 by Senator King, also Representative Wright, concerning the removal of certain identifying information from a motor vehicle registration card.
Representative Wright.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move that the House adopt the first report of the first conference committee on Senate Bill 131.
You please explain what the conference committee did.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Actually, novel idea on this bill. You'll remember we had this discussion on the floor about whether or not we should remove address information from motor vehicle cards, registration cards. We are at a compromise, and I believe it's a good compromise to print the address on one card and remove it from the other card. You're already given 2 motor vehicle registration cards when you go register your vehicle or when you receive an updated card in the mail. So one of those will not have the address. You can keep that one in your vehicle, prevent fraud or potential burglarization of your home, and then keep one at your home to use for the purpose of using at the polling place. And I would ask for an aye vote.
Representative Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Wright. I too rise in support of the adoption of the first report of the conference committee. We came to a good agreement here, and to the end that Representative Wright was also trying to get to, there is a disclosure included on one of the cards that says that it has been known that folks will try to use this information to conduct theft, and so that's an additional consumer protection provision that we included in conference committee. I urge its adoption.
Seeing no further discussion, the question before the House is the adoption of the first conference committee report of the first conference committee on Senate Bill 131. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representatives McCann and McLaughlin. Close the machine. With 64 aye votes, 0 no votes, 1 excused, and 0 absent, the House adopts the first report of the first conference committee on Senate Bill 131. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the House adopt the repassage of Senate Bill 131 as amended.
Seeing no further discussion, the question for the House of the repassage of Senate Bill 131 is amended. Mr. Cole, will please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative Priola and close the machine. With 64 aye votes, 0 no votes, 1 excused, and 0 absent, the House repasses Senate Bill 131 as amended. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Cole, will please read the title of the House Bill 1336.
House Bill 1336 by Representative Duran, also Senator Stebbins, concerning the provision for payment of the expenses of the executive, legislative, and judicial departments of the state of Colorado and of its agencies and institutions for and during the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2014, except as otherwise noted.
Representative Duran.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the House adopt the first report of the first conference committee on House Bill 1336.
Please explain what the conference committee did, Representative Duran.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. All right, so there are several things that we actually did. There were some House amendments that were retained when the bill entered the conference committee, issues concerning restorative justice, footnotes regarding ATMs, the OSPB cost-benefit analysis, and the Lower North Fork fire settlement payments. Also, there were a couple Senate amendments that were retained as well with regards to advanced industries funding being reduced to $5 million, the aerial fire fleet funded at $19.672 million, and TANF reserves for employment-focused programs at $2 million of cash fund. Now, beyond those issues, we did have the authority to go beyond the scope, and so what we did is we made several technical corrections that the JBC staff brought to us. We did a new footnote added for autism study roll forward authority, hospice rate increases in the long bill. We also included security at the LSB office and 1525 Sherman at $300,000 general fund. We also made changes to increase the restorative justice cash fund spending authority. We also made some changes with regards to settlement of the Lower North Fork fire pending claims at $11.1 million. And of course, we had a funding source for the aerial firefighting fleet at $19.672 million general fund. So I ask for your support.
Representative Sonnenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I've been down here 8 years, done 8 budgets. I must tell you, this is probably the most irresponsible budget we've ever passed in this chamber. And I tell you that because what the JBC has done. As we do in every one of those 8 years, and the Speaker was part of that a number of years ago, he didn't do the same things that we saw this year when he was part of the Joint Budget Committee. But what we saw this year, which came out of this committee, is we gave them the authority to go over and above and beyond the differences between the two versions. And the Joint Budget Committee abused it. They literally abused it. Abuse that power, and you can start with the restorative justice. All of a sudden, the restorative justice was put in place, but instead of leaving it where it was, let's double the funding. Nobody offered that. Nobody asked for that. This budget looks like a book of pet projects, and that's unfortunate. We were also told that there was somewhere in the neighborhood of $10 million in each chamber that we had to deal with, that we could utilize for bills, that we could utilize for funding. And yet what we come up with? $19.7 million for a firefighting unit? Where did that money come from? Why am I not aware of that money? Why wasn't anybody else aware of that money? Members, I could go on and on about how this budget and how this process worked. Because in the first 7 years I've been here, it hasn't been like this. With that said, what I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to move to reject the conference committee report, send it back to a second conference committee, and ask the JBC members to do it right. Do it the way we expect. With that, Mr. Speaker, I move that we reject the conference committee report and appoint a new conference committee.
Representative Duran.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, you have in front of you a budget that has a positive impact on essentially every community in the state of Colorado. And Representative Sonnenberg said that nobody requested for the additional cash fund spending authority for restorative justice. I'm not sure where you're receiving your information, Representative Sonnenberg, but actually the judiciary requested that additional cash fund spending authority, and it was granted. Representative Sonnenberg, you also talked about pet projects. Well, let's talk about pet projects. Let's talk about the substance of what is in this budget. Let's talk about that there is a historical increase for higher ed institutions across the state of Colorado by $100 million. Let's talk about the fact. Yes.
Can we just keep it to the conference committee report right now? Your budget's great, but we're just talking about the conference committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Duran.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask that the conference committee be adopted and that you reject Representative Sonnenberg's motion.
Is there any further discussion? Representative Sonnenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And to my motion, oops, I brought the wrong stuff. I didn't see the amendment. If there was an amendment put forth in the Senate for 700 and some thousand for restorative justice, please show that to me. I didn't see it. I didn't see it in the House either. That's what I'm talking about. If there was an amendment that I missed, I truly apologize. If there wasn't, you went, not you, the Joint Budget Committee went over and above what they should have done and what their responsibilities were. That's why I asked for the conference committee report be rejected.
Representative May.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I just want to be clear on the restorative justice piece. The actual bill from when it was passed has it increasing in the out year to $481,000. Then what we received was from judicial asking us that they made a technical error in their request, that they didn't, we didn't give them the appropriate spending authority. We did have that permission to go beyond the scope, and it was simply to have the line balanced to what actually was received. And what the bill does is it has a pilot program for 4 judicial districts. You have the 10th, which is Pueblo. You have the 12th, which is Saguache, Alamosa, Castillo, Caneos, Rio Grande, and Mineral. You have the 19th, which is Weld, and you have the 20th, which is Boulder. So out of a $23 billion and some change budget, we're disputing a very, very tiny amount. And I don't think by fixing a technical mistake in a line for a cash fund that was requested from judicial, a reason to send this back for a second committee, and that we abused our authority. You gave us permission to go beyond the scope. We did that in a small area, and that's all that happened.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, the question for the House is Representative Sonnenberg's motion to reject the first report of the first conference committee and ask that a second committee be formed. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative Kraft-Hart. Close the machine with 26 aye votes, 38 no votes, 1 excused, and 0 absent. Representative Sonnenberg's motion to reject the first conference committee report and adopt the second is lost. We're back to the original motion to adopt the first report of the first conference committee on House Bill 1336. Seeing no discussion, the I'll keep my comments to myself.
Keep them or don't.
Representative McNulty.
Just 1 minute, please.
Seeing no discussion, the question before the House is the... Representative McNulty.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This has been a long debate from start to finish on this budget, and I think that there are those of us who are not satisfied with the end result. For my part, I am going to support the conference committee report. I think that while there are things that I might find objectionable in the conference committee report, and Representative Sonnenberg has ably pointed some of those out, so I don't need to. I do support the money for a aerial firefighting fleet. I think that we have learned from recent history that those resources are needed, are due, and will save lives, and I think that is an important part of what's in this conference committee report. And the funding to pay damages to those who lost property and loved ones in the lower North Fork fire are two very important pieces of this conference committee report. That said, voting for the conference committee report, I'm not likely to vote for the budget because it does a lot of things that it ought not do in a lot of places it ought not do it. But that, to me, that's not a reason to vote against the conference committee report, so I will support the conference committee report.
Seeing no further discussion, the question for the House is the adoption of the first report of the first conference committee on House Bill 1336. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative, close the machine. With 49 aye votes, 15 no votes, 1 excused, and 0 absent, the first report of the first conference committee on House Bill 1336 is adopted. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the readoption of House Bill 1336 as amended.
Seeing Representative Holbert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, having been in the position once on the initial passage of a budget of the past 64-1 and being that one no, I heard from some that this is the only obligation that we have as a General Assembly this year is to pass a balanced budget. Well, that's true. But for those of us who are voting no, I want to speak up and say that it isn't our obligation to vote for something with which we do not agree. It's the JBC's obligation and the majority's obligation to bring a budget that we can vote for. And it's their obligation right now to get 33 votes, and I'm sure they will. But I'll be a no vote and ask you to follow me and let's stand up for what we believe to be right. Representative Sonnenberg has pointed out issues with the conference committee report. We had long debate here on the budget, offered amendments. Most of those were rejected. Most of that gets stripped out in the Senate. But the obligation now is not to hold your nose and vote for something you don't agree with. The obligation is to bring a budget that can achieve 33 or more votes. Ask for a no vote.
Representative May.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I asked for an aye vote. There's been a lot of discussion about what was in this bill, and it does a lot of things when we went to conference committee, and two of them are outlined by Representative McNulty in terms of by voting for this bill, you're voting for the placeholder for the lower North Fork fire settlements. There's 22 roughly outstanding claims and settlements that need to occur, and by us putting this into the law bill, it allows us to pay those when we're not in session, and I think that's very important. The other thing it does is it allows us to pay for the aerial firefighting fleet. The reason why it was added after the fact is because the report came out after the fact. Can't help with the timing. Doesn't mean I don't do the right thing. And we did the right thing. It's as simple as that. There was nothing gamey about it. It was just getting a report after the long bill was produced and put before you, and then sent back to conference committee, and we had the discussion. The other thing is that it is absolutely impossible to have a long bill that every member here will like everything in a bill. We all have what we want to fund. We all have issues that we don't want to fund. But we tried to put together something that we saw as a balance for what we do here, what our core issues are. And yeah, it's not 100% even for me. I mean, I don't think that's a realistic expectation, and I understand your point. But there's a lot of good things in this bill that if you would go through it and find the projects that you support, you'll probably find that it was funded. The Senate voted for this bill. It was a bipartisan support from the Senate, and almost half the Republicans voted for this bill. So I don't know the reason why people make the decisions that they do, but I hope that instead of looking at a personality thing, that you look at the bill. Thank you. I ask for an aye vote.
Representative Sonnenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, I am indeed going to vote on the bill as the bill. And let me start by saying thank you, actually, to the JBC members, because that's a lot of work. That truly is a lot of work. I appreciate the work that you put into this. And I know you're in a no-win situation, and thank God I'm not there. You guys would have shot me by now. With that said, members, you brought up the firefighting. Let me talk about that a little, and why I think that is a problem in the budget. I think that's something that should have been a bill, that should have been brought forward so we can have the discussion on the merits of whether or not a firefighting fleet of 2 fixed wing and a rotary is the correct avenue. Because I, for one, don't believe that's the case. Do we need firefighting, some sort of system and team and organization? Dang straight we do. Here's what happens with a fixed wing, one of those fixed wing aircrafts that they're talking about, multi-engine, the jets. It takes longer to pre-flight those and get those in the air a single engine air tanker can have already dropped a load, be back and reloaded in the time it takes to pre-flight one of those larger planes. We have had fire instances where those planes have sat at Loveland during fires and they can't get in the air until 9 o'clock when the single engine air tankers, the seats, are actually in the air at daybreak. I would like to see a different scenario utilizing those small single-engine air tankers so we can hit hard and hit early. But that's not the debate we were able to have. All of a sudden, we funded a firefighting system in which we couldn't discuss the merits of that system. We passed a bill last year that studied that. I don't even know if we have the results from that yet, but the point is that we put money into the long bill from money we didn't know we had without having a policy discussion on the importance or how best we do that. There are other things, obviously, that I don't like in the long bill, and you're right, there's things good, there's things bad. The key for all of us is there enough good to outweigh the bad? And is that why we're going to be a yes vote on the bill? For me, the answer is no. I'm going to be a no. That's the disappointing part in me and not being able to have that discussion. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative May.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And just to clarify for Representative Sonnenberg, the study did come out. That's what we based the amount on. And we had discussion around the report. Senator Lambert, who actually, this is his area of expertise, was very supportive of this, just so you know. But the report is released, and that's why it's in the long bill now. Thank you.
Representative Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative May commented concern about personalities. What we're talking about here is not personalities. What I want to talk about is discomfort with the process and having so many issues come into conference committee that had not been managed through the whole time we've been in session. There was rumor that the House had $10 million to play with outside the budget, and the Senate had $10 million. Well, so who's controlling that? And where are the bills that are attached to that? I mean, the JBC was established in order to bring some order to this process, and I feel like we lost that order this year. This would be my 6th budget, and I've never been so confused about where we are with certain bills, whether they're in the budget or out of the budget, and who has control over that. So, when we're talking about spending taxpayer dollars, we always know there's going to be horse trading going on, but it just feels like pork to me this year that, there are just too many pet projects that have entered into managing how we move dollars around. So, the whole idea of the way we do our bills are not to be able to earmark funds for pet projects for individual legislators, but to have it as part of the larger process. You run a bill if it's something new, and then you build it into the budget. But all of this horse trading that's been going on makes me very uncomfortable with the process that we've been through this year, and the firefighting is just one of those issues. I'm on the other side of Representative McNulty on that issue. We need a lot more conversation about that, and here it's inserted by the Senate and handled by the conference committee, and we're going to accept it. So I'm afraid I still have to be a no vote.
Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker Pro Tem. I feel like I'm somewhat in the twilight zone out here. This debate is fascinating because I think people forget history, I guess. This conference committee report and this budget is no different than what's happened before in conference committees. For every year I was on the budget committee, and if we remember the years when I was in the minority and you guys were in the majority, there were a lot of things done in conference committee report that were well beyond the scope of the budget that went through the House and the Senate. This is nothing new. This is actually small compared to what we've seen in conference committees on the budget. So that's one. Two, on this firefighting fleet, there's been lots of conversations. We passed a bill last year and said, go study it. And they did, and they came back and they said, here's the results. This is what you should do. And then we got it it came to us, I think, the day the long bill was introduced or the Friday before the long bill was introduced. Not enough time for us to really digest it and think about it. The Senate put money in for it to fund what the recommendations from the study that we asked for did. So that's what this is doing. And how do we get the money? I think that's an important question. Representative Sonnenberg hasn't been answered, so let me answer your question about how we got the money to be able to pay for the $19.6 million. Two things. One is to move with the Tabor Reserve. There was a valuation of buildings about $9.6 million more than what was originally thought of when the budget was being worked on and they did the Tabor Reserve. So we were able to use that $9.6 million, move some money out of controlled maintenance and be able to pay for that. The other piece, we talk about bills, the Hazardous Response Fund had $10 million in it going to help. That people in the Senate felt and the Budget Committee felt could be delayed. It got put into the spillover of if money above the revenue goes in, that would go and fund there. So that's how we got the money for that. Then lastly, I just want to touch base on the set-asides, because horse trading and all this, I get worried when we hear words. I mean, we have, I would argue, one of the most clean and positioned process to go through budget issues, and one of the best legislatures in the country when it deals with dealing with the budget the way we process it. But there is, and some of you haven't been here in the times when we've had it, but there are things called set-asides. And what's been traditional in the House of Representatives and the Senate is that each year the Joint Budget Committee sets aside an amount of money for the Appropriations Committee in the House and the Appropriations Committee in the Senate to come up with what bills you can fund, because all of you, all 64 of you, and me included, 65 of us, have bills we want funded that don't go through the budget. Because you can't do statutory language in the budget. You actually have to change law by a special bill, which is what all of our bills do. That's what we're funding. We have a set-aside. There were conversations in our caucus lunch, which is open to anyone who wants to come, today at 12 o'clock if we get out of here. I don't know what we're having yet today, but the food is not open to everyone. But you can come and join and sit with us. We're happy. Maybe we'll even feed you. Yeah. So, we talked about it, where our priorities are. We talked about 10 for the House, 10 for the Senate. Well, in reality, we met with Senate and we said, well, there's some bills in our chamber that are, the 10 and 10 doesn't even out. We're going to work together between House and Senate and figure out what are things we like and what are things we don't like and how we make sure it balances. There are a lot of things we like and don't like. But this idea of horse trading, it comes up to the vote of each of us every day. So Appropriations Committee decides what passes and what doesn't pass, and then we as the General Assembly decides what passes and what doesn't pass. The most important thing that we have to have, and what the Appropriations Committee needs to do in the House and Senate, is make sure that by the time we sine die, that we've sent enough bills to the governor that don't get us over our budget. That's what their goal is. And so when you're looking at what bills should pass and what shouldn't, they're trying to balance all the needs of everyone. So there's no horse trading or any of this. This is like this weird idea. This has always happened for years and years. And so it just fascinates me, this conversation, because I think we have to remember the history of what happened. I remember the history when we were in the minority and we had to deal with some things to get votes on the budget. And there was negotiations between the House and the Senate. If we want to talk about horse trading, that was probably the most obvious horse trading I've ever seen in this Capitol. But this is about putting priorities together. We get to vote on all the special bills that are in those that are still out there, and we just got to make sure at the end of the day we don't spend more money than we got. That's the bottom line. This is a good budget. Representative Duran, Representative May, Representative Giroux have done amazing work. I'd ask for a yes vote.
Representative Quorum.
Thank you, Madam Speaker Pro Tem. Mr. Speaker, with all due respect, as a horse trader, I take offense and object to what we do in this building called horse trading.
Representative Stevens.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker and Rep. Quorum, for injecting a little levity into this budget situation. So this is my 8th year, my final budget, and so when we want to talk history, Mr. Speaker, the first year in 06 when we came in, we actually had a year not unlike in a way where the budget is this year. We had some items we could all agree on, and then we had some extra money And so, no offense to today, but we've argued today about all kinds of, we called them the Pet Project Day. But we had $1 million here, kind of like the school lunch protection program, and we found another $5 million. I remember Bernie was trying so hard. There were all kinds of little pet projects, and just like today, we passed a bunch of them. The Indian Tribe, the Social Workers for Juveniles, all of this. Felt like I was in the Twilight Zone today. These things don't go away. They don't go away. And in very many cases, they overshadow really kind of the bigger ticket items that we even heard today in the conference committee report. I've got Black Forest as my district, and it is important in aerial firefighter. This is important. But in previous years, we managed to come to consensus, particularly the year, no offense, Rep. Holbert, but we had a 64-1 vote. And we've managed to come together. And we've managed to have JBC committees that actually where people weren't left out, where we really got some things done. I object to this because not because people didn't do hard work or good work. Listen, you're not going to find any more hard-working people than Rep. May or Rep. Giroux or Senator Stedman. They are amazing people. They do hard work. But it is the philosophy behind the budget today that we just can't agree with. And I don't think when I looked at how the process was, and when we talk about set-asides, I think certainly Mr. Speaker's right on certain set-asides. But this year we saw them more for pet projects, folks, than really, I think, even the huge things. And every one of those adds up. In the years that when we had really tough times and we took that negative factor away from school districts, and can't seem to get it back now when times are somewhat turning up. To me, is just we tried. I mean, I think we did some decent work. We could have done much better. And why is that? Because the pet projects, the pork, so to speak, that everyone has to go back to their district and go, woohoo, here we are. It seemed to overshadow some of this. And so I want to applaud. Listen, Rep. Giroux, I've worked with you for a number of years. I know you do great work. And Rep. May, this is your first year, and you've just done really good work, and I so appreciate it. And did not mean to leave out Rep. Duran, because anything she does, as you know, is done well. But I can do it better. Anyway. So, with that said, I'm going to be a no on this budget. I appreciate the hard work, but we just have so much that overshadows this. And in years where we could get to a 64-1, it's unfortunate today it'll be party line vote. So I urge a no vote on this budget.
Representative Sauenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I apologize, members, for getting us kind of sidetracked on one specific issue. I wanted to talk, that was an example, and I wanted to talk more why I think this is an irresponsible budget. Members, we have taken money from a number of different places. Instead of new projects, we should be paying that money back. The largest portion of that, obviously, is K through 12. We should be taking the excess money and helping our rural school districts as well as our urban school districts have stability over the next several years so they can plan to educate their kids to the standards we have set for them. This budget is not about repaying those debts that we owe. I consider this budget. No, I'm not going to say that. Members, I had asked for this to go back to conference committee so we could address some of those issues, so we could put money and pay back where we needed to pay back. That was rejected. Now I'm asking you to reject this budget and let's do it right. We reject this budget. We bring another bill that says, you know what? We are going to pay back K through 12. We are going to pay back those cash funds that we've stolen. And stolen may be a harsh word, but money that we took so we could balance our budget, but we owe it to those people that paid those cash funds in to restore those cash funds for the purposes that money was collected. Members, I ask for a no vote.
Is there further discussion? Representative Duro.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Duran, I may come back up after you, depending on how our conversation goes. But members, I wanted to thank you all very, very much. Mr. Minority Leader, what you have done to involve our caucus to do the hard work on this budget, thank you, sir. Thank you for what you've done. I appreciate the fact that we were able to caucus this morning and go over the changes, and I appreciate the very intelligent questions. But I'd like to say a bigger thank you to all of you who were here 2 years ago when I chaired the budget. 2 years ago, I wore this pin on my lapel. The pin, it's in the 1800s, when you'd have a picture taken, you know how they used to do the little tiny paintings of people, the keepsakes? Well, after photography was invented, they'd do the same thing, and you'd put a loved one in the frame, and you wear it on your lapel. Well, this is my great-grandmother. They immigrated from Poland. I think I talked about her before. Her last name was Baruki Kolego, and she actually, they immigrated to Chicago, and she ended up with her children without a husband, homesteaded in Wyoming. And as you all know, that Wyoming gave the vote to women as a territory before Colorado gave the vote to women as a state. And I'm very proud of Wyoming, and I'm very proud of Colorado. We have a lot to be proud of. And I mentioned before the fact that this budget committee from the House was made up of all women, and last year it was. And I was very proud of the fact that you let me be the first woman that chaired the Joint Budget Committee from the House in the history of the state. And I'm also very proud of the fact that you all gave me a gift 2 years ago when I chaired the Budget Committee. I didn't do it right. It's a tough process. But what was important to me was consensus and listening to everybody and making sure that I made the budget as bipartisan and as inclusive as I possibly could. And when we had the vote on that first budget, and of the members sitting in this body, 64 out of the 65 members, he who shall remain nameless shall be nameless. Everyone but that particular individual voted for the budget. That actually was a huge, huge compliment. Now fast forward to where we were the other day when we had our initial vote on this, and I was the only Republican. So we went from the point where all but one person in the body voted for the budget to the point where only one Republican votes for the budget. I understand your concerns. I appreciate your involvement in this. And I appreciate your understanding that this is really the only thing that we need to do as a body. This is it. We could all go home right now. But I also appreciate your questions downstairs. I appreciate the fact that your awareness on my side of the aisle. I'm really proud of you all. It's not a perfect process. It's really not. But every one of you in this chamber are to be respected and thanked for your participation. There should be no belittling, there should be no negative comments about what should or should not have been included in the budget without an understanding of every one of you is entitled to your say, and your vote is your say. Thank you.
Madam Speaker Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I stand in strong support of this budget. I can't tell you how proud I am of the work that has been accomplished by this body. This is a great budget. This is my 4th year, and I think this is the best budget I've ever seen. What makes this budget great is the investment that we're making in education, K through 12. When you look at the amount, close to $500 million that we are investing in our schools is significant. And then when you think about how much we're investing in higher education, another $100 million, that's great news. When I came into this chambers, we were cutting. I think the increase that we've given to education is over, 11.2% increase in education, which means that we're investing in our kids. And we didn't stop with just investing in our kids. We're talking about making our families stronger. When you think about some of the bills that we've passed to ensure that those who may be slipping below the poverty lines and some of the things that we've done to shore that up, that's good. $4.2 million that we've invested in making housing more affordable. That's a great budget. When you think of all that we've done to address floods and fire recovery, that is good news. When you think about what we've invested as it relates to our reserve, we've increased the reserve so that our governor has an opportunity to respond in a rapid manner, which is why we were able to get so many of those bridges and roads repaired, was because of that reserve. So this is not about looking at the past. This is about right now. This is about our future, and I think this is a great budget. And I want to thank Representative May and Representative Duran for doing such a phenomenal job. I love this budget.
Representative Duran.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I rise in strong support of the budget. You know, we have had a lot of history in this chamber, and 4 years ago when I was first elected, I remember having many conversations and disagreements, policy disagreements, about whether or not school lunches should be funded in the state of Colorado, regarding how undocumented students should be treated. I remember conversations when it came to the budget about whether or not poor children should have access to health care. And those were meaningful policy disputes. And this year, we were a little lucky on the Joint Budget Committee because we had more dollars coming into the state than previous years. Now, I've heard a lot of conversations about quote-unquote pet projects. Now, I don't know about you all, but I would never call something a pet project like legislation to provide more training for district attorneys, like legislation to make sure that those individuals who get behind the wheel and are under the influence of drugs or alcohol have the correct penalties. I would never call things like making sure that there's funding for forensic sex assault kit testing that was brought forward by some of my friends on the other side of the aisle. I would never call those things pet projects. I would also never call things like making sure that there's funding going into advanced industries a pet project, nor would I ever call making sure that we have parole reform in this state a pet project, or an increase of $100 million for institutions of higher ed, or the CBI Pueblo Lab, or the Discovery Task Force, or affordable child care that passed this body with bipartisan support. I would never call any of those things pet projects. And the reason why I would never call any of those things pet projects because they have been brought forward in a bipartisan way, not to benefit Republicans, not to benefit Democrats, but to benefit the people of Colorado. To benefit the people of Colorado, regardless of your party affiliation, so that we can work together in a way to do what is right for the state. Now, I saw on the Twitter feed earlier, Representative Giroux said that I was inexperienced, and didn't know how to run a committee. Well, I will not dignify that statement with a response. And I will not dignify that statement with a response because this budget, when you look at the substance of this budget, when you look at all of the things that it has done for every community across the state of Colorado, that is what I hang my hat on. And so let's start with going back to some of the victories. Some of the victories that are in this budget for the rural areas of the state, for the suburban areas of the state, for the urban areas of the state. We are making incredible investments in higher education and K-12 public schools. We are working to protect those that are most vulnerable in society, those that are homeless, those in the DD community, those that need that meaningful assistance. And I appreciate, truly appreciate, almost half of the Senate Republicans who voted in favor of this budget. I appreciate the strong bipartisan support that came out of the Senate with efforts to be able to work together. And maybe at the end of the day, we may pick things here and there and say, well, maybe the budget just wasn't good enough. Maybe doing a 6.5% reserve was just not good enough. But I would encourage you all to look at the whole and the benefits to your particular communities and your districts. And I respectfully ask for your support. I would never think I would say this, but I would hope that we can follow with the lead of the Senate, where we had almost half of the Senate Republicans voting in favor of the bill with strong bipartisan support. I ask for your support.
Representative Giroux.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I stand by what I said before and what I said before then and before then. There's a difference in the tone in this chamber than what happened in the Senate. Senator Stedman has talked to me about that. And sometimes it's just the tone, the difference in tone that will make a difference. Part of the job of a joint budget committee chair is to sell the budget. And that's what we're going to see here. We're going to see how well the budget has been sold. Because you have a decision to make, and you have a vote to cast. You know I'm going to be a yes vote on this budget. You know I am. I committed to that a long time ago. But we'll just see how well you feel you've been represented, it has been presented, and the mood of that presentation. It shows.
Mr. Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Duran is correct, and there are several positive things in this budget. And I said this the first time that it came back through. Representative Fields came down and pointed out some positives as far as some significant investments that we've made in K through 12 and higher education. Yes, there are some positives that are in there, but I would like to address a couple of the comments as far as when we talk about pet projects, maybe there was pet projects funded, maybe there wasn't. But I think there's a lot of in this bill that there's perception that maybe pet projects were funded. Like, for instance, maybe a library in somebody's district was funded ahead of some other projects. Maybe somebody, all of their bills except for one, somehow became a priority for the state of Colorado and were all funded in the budget. I don't think that was the case for the other 64 members as well. So whether or not there was pet projects funded or not, there is perception there were things that were given priority over others. When we see a process like tomorrow, if you look at your calendar and look at appropriations, and there's another 18 bills that are up, and some of these, the numbers are so low, there's people's pre-file bills. And to think that these bills pass out of committee and been sitting in appropriations till after the long bill has already been complete to say, well, we already know what's going to happen with those. Somebody else has made the decision for the rest of this body as to what we're going to fund and not going to fund.
Mr. Minority Leader, can we stick to the budget?
When I'm talking about funding bills, I don't know what else that would have to do if it doesn't do with the budget, but I will try to stick to the budget.
Actually, doesn't really have to do with the budget, but it's outside the budget and in appropriations. So please continue, Mr. Minority Leader.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So, for instance, this budget does not fund incarcerating people for killing people when you're driving while high or drunk, which obviously passed out of the House and in the conference committee was taken out. And basically, the decision was made to kill that in Appropriations Committee and not find the funding for that. So I think when we talk about perceptions that maybe the process was different this year than last or other years, maybe it's not been the case, but there is perception that has happened. And I will also piggyback on what Representative Giroux was talking about, the difference between the House and the Senate. Now, obviously, there's a one-vote majority in the Senate, so they're kind of forced to actually work with the Republicans over there. So they were able to actually go through and say, okay, what are your priorities, and then what can we get through and actually get that 18th vote that we actually need, because there is a one-vote majority. But the case over here in the House, there's a different scenario, and so there has been no way, shape, or form the need to have to work with the minority party. So that Representative Duran will be another case as to why there's a different tone and maybe the difference as to why House Republicans might have a different feeling about the budget than Senate Republicans. So with that, I'm going to still continue to stick with my no vote on the budget. And I think we've heard enough from my fellow caucus members, and I think we will know where they will be as well. So thank you.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, members. I'd like to speak to the process of the budget and how it worked this year and how that relates to the history of the budget. We have a very good system in this state. It's a model of a bipartisan joint budget committee that takes the governor's proposed budget and writes a budget. And all of those hearings of the departments, of the agencies, are open, and many of us participate in those. And we were allowed to do that. We were allowed to ask questions. We're allowed to get those questions answered. And as has been said before, they work very, very hard. And I want to thank every single one of them, Representative Giroux, Representative May, and Madam Chairwoman, Representative Duran. They work very hard. I, quite frankly, have a hard time understanding what we're talking about in terms of the process of the budget when we talk about tone, when we talk about how we make decisions on that, horse trading or whatever it is. I, quite frankly, don't see a huge difference between this budget or any other budget that I have been involved in voting on over the years. When we were in the minority, I was told very plainly about a couple bills that I wanted to introduce that, well, you may be in trouble because they require money, and as a member of the minority, you're probably not going to get that bill passed. Well, guess what? They were right. Now, that's the nature of this body. We have majorities and minorities. We set priorities in this body based on what we believe we can do for the people of the state of Colorado. And that's really what a budget is all about. We are here representing our constituents and the people of the state of Colorado. And I quite frankly believe that that process has been done very, very well in this budget, and quite frankly, better than it was when I was in the minority. Now, well, maybe that's a matter of perception on my part. Maybe that's a matter of what I thought the tone was on my part. But I think it goes a little too far to say that somehow the process of this budget was a problem, when in fact we've done it this way for years and years and years. And I quite frankly am very proud of what we've done because of what is in that budget for the people of the state of Colorado. And I will vote a yes vote on this budget, and I will do so enthusiastically for what it does for the people of the state of Colorado. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Seeing no further discussion, the question for the House is the repassage of House Bill 1336 as amended. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote.
On a vote of,
no, let's do it downstairs.
Representatives Del Grosso, Lawrence, May, Sane, and Pabon. Representative May and Representative Sane. Representative Sane. Close the machine with 38 aye votes, 26 no votes, 1 excused and 0 absent. House Bill 1336 as amended is repassed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of House Bill 1342.
House Bill 1342, Representative Duran, also Senator Stebbins, concerning transfers of monies related to capital construction.
Representative Duran.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the House adopt the first report of the first conference committee on House Bill 1342.
Please continue, Representative Duran.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So there were a couple of changes that we made. One is that the Fort Lewis College Burnt Hall stays funded at $10 million above the line. WSU Quigley Hall is now all below the line at $25 million on the list. However, if there's additional revenue that comes into the state, then it is on the list of items to be funded. There was also adjustments made to the general fund and state education fund transfers at the end of fiscal year 2013-14. And we had a lot of conversations about the feedback that I think this body gave us and that the Senate gave us. I think we ended up with a good compromise, and I ask for your support.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, the question for the House is the adoption of the first report of the first conference committee on House Bill 1342. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representatives Del Grosso, Pabon, May, and McNulty. Close the machine with 63 aye votes, 1 no vote, 1 excused, and 0 absent. The House adopts the first report of the first conference committee on House Bill 1342. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the repassage of House Bill 1342 as amended.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the repassage of House Bill 1342 is amended. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. So they voted against the budget. They voted for the projects and buildings. That's pet projects. Representative May, close the machine. With 63 aye votes, 1 no vote, Least consistent. 1 excused and 0 absent. House Bill 1342 is repassed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. House will stand in a brief but pleasant recess. House will come back to order. There we go. Announcements and introductions. Representative McNulty.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask to be excused until about 11 o'clock tomorrow.
Representative McNulty to be excused as requested. Representative McCann.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members of House Insurance and Environment Committee, we will be meeting over the lunch hour, so if you can pick up a lunch or have lunch brought in, let us convene at 12:30 sharp. We should be able to get through by 1:30.
Representative Court.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Okay, Dems, we will have our caucus lunch as usual, and aides for those of you who are on the Health Committee have been notified to go get your lunch and bring it to you in committee. Other members, please come to caucus lunch as usual. Thank you.
Representative, why my brain just like totally Young. It's like, I'm sorry, I just totally. Sorry, Representative Young.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
At least you remember that name, thank God.
Yeah.
And I'm much younger, and I'm having problems.
Apparently, well, I won't go into, what might be happening, but
yeah,
might be old age creeping up on you. Members, I think we missed the time that they were here, but we had some 8th graders from St. Mary's Catholic School in Greeley that were up in the gallery, and St. Mary's is in my district and actually about a mile from my house. So I'm sorry we missed them, but if you could at least acknowledge that they were here at the Capitol today, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you, Representative Young. Yes. Representative Schaefer. And Rankin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, just remember, tomorrow morning, 7:30, we have the Bipartisan Economic Development Caucus meeting on the topic of water. I know you're interested in water, the key to Colorado's economy.
And this will be one of your probably last opportunities during the session to hear about the water plan that will be prepared over the summer. Going to be extremely important to the future of Colorado. Next year it'll be coming back. We'll be reviewing it and as a legislature, but it's very important that everybody and your constituents follow the water plan over the summer. So don't miss this opportunity. 7:30 tomorrow morning and 112.
Representative Duran.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Joint Budget Committee will resume at 1:30. We do have one agenda item, and we're adding one also. We will be talking about the marijuana tax proposal by the governor, and Representative Rose, excuse. Joke.
Representative Kagan.
Thank you. Members of the House Judiciary Committee, because of the availability of sponsors of legislation, we will be starting not at 1:30 as usual, but at 1:45 p.m. 1:45 p.m. in room 0112.
Representative Holbert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, today is Douglas County Day at the Capitol. Senator Harvey is hosting a large group of constituents from Douglas County over in the old Supreme Court chamber, and if any of those folks are in the House chamber here now or up in the gallery, lunch is served if you ordered that over in the Legislative Services building. And I do apologize earlier, I was waiting for the Honorable John Hickenlooper to finish speaking to that group so I could say a few words to them, and I missed a vote here, so I do apologize, Mr. Speaker.
Madam Majority Leader. You want to recess this to 1?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the House stand in recess until 1 o'clock this afternoon, at which point we will adjourn until 9 tomorrow morning.
Seeing no objection, and remember, members, we will be coming back on the floor tomorrow after committee and Thursday after committee. The House will stand in recess until 1 p.m. today.